Hey everyone, this is Nick Allen with Better Together. I'm here tonight with Laurel Cole, a candidate for City Council, and I think she's got a good shot at this election. We're excited for it. She's doing a town hall for us, and well, Laurel, go ahead and just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of summary and why you decided to run.
Yeah. So I am the executive director of Habitat for Humanity. And so I moved here just about 4 years ago. But when I moved here, I got really involved with attending city council meetings and working with the city to try to increase affordable housing and make sure, that we're doing things that are benefiting affordable housing versus hurting affordable housing. And through that process over the last 4 years, I've just noticed that there's been times where I think that people come to council meetings and they give their 3 minutes and they don't feel like that was heard or meaningful because there's no responses. And I feel like as a community, I hear a lot that we are feeling like we don't really have meaningful community engagement in our local government process. And so some of my strengths are in strategic planning. And I do create and manage the budget for Habitat, although
Mhm.
it's not um, nearly as large as the cities. It's the same,
A budget's a
give
budget,
and
you know? Yeah.
yeah. And so I think that being able to, and I'm really good at seeing processes that we can improve. And so I'm honest, I'm really running to try to help increase communication and transparency and get like meaningful community engagement from our community, because I know it's frustrating to stand there, give a 3 minute, monologue and then walk away going, well, the city's going to do what the city's going to do either way.
Right.
And I know that the words are heard, but it doesn't feel like a meaningful dialogue because no one's responding to you. And there might not be follow up on your comments. And so it just kind of feels like a black hole. And
Hmm.
so really I ran because I feel like my strengths are something that our city needs right now. And I'm hoping that we can improve some processes.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Well, I mean, speaking of, communication and getting feedback from the community, we have some live viewers today. This is a town hall. So everyone feel free to just shoot your questions into the chat. I'll do my best to keep track of them. We'll kind of bounce back and forth between questions that I've prepared and then the community, but actually, we already have a community question right now. Laurel, if you're ready for it.
Sure.
So, first one, Mary Ann messaged us, says, thanks for being the only candidate to sign the Save the Pool pledge to keep the OM pool open beyond the opening of the CRC. What specifically will you do to help save the pool, or sorry, to help the Save the Pool committee to keep the pool open for years to come?
So I'm hoping, I don't know if I have a solution at this moment, but I know
Sure.
that in my opinion, protecting our already existing resources is excruciatingly important.
Mm,
Um, I think, I've had some conversations with people in Orchard Mesa, that, everyone's concerned about the pool, but there's also been a lot of concern about the library. And it's been brought up that there's no urgent care or medical facilities out that way. And I know this is something that Cody's been working on, trying to get a medical partnership to partner with the pool. I really think that's a great avenue to take. And again, I haven't been in those conversations, but I feel like creating a public private partnership
mm.
um, of some kind would be very, very impactful, and kind of just help continue all of the resources that are in Orchard Mesa right now and maybe extend some. I know that it's very I live in a part of town too where I feel like we get kind of forgotten unless somebody wants to build an interchange through our neighborhood. But
Gotcha. Okay.
so I think that I know what it feels like to see all of the money going to a certain portion of town, and then be like, well, what about us? And so um, I think that's part of where being fiscally accountable as a city,
Mm,
where we need to prioritize our projects.
hmm.
And before we're taking on new projects, we need to make sure that we're protecting the current resources in our community. And so I think that, you know, working with our new city manager and, our council, that hopefully we can find ways to continue funding and increase the funding that Orchard Mesa Pool gets. And I can't make any promises. And again, I
Sure.
don't know what anyone else is going to feel, but I know that um, I do strongly believe that we should be trying to keep Orchard Mesa Pool alive and going and fix it so that it can continue to be around in the future.
Right. No, I appreciate that as an Orchard Mesa resident, as a Save the Pool committee member. Yeah, we care a lot about that. And I think you made a good point too of just protecting and even enhancing the resources we already have. That's great. Uh, Greg Heist messaged in. He has a suggestion, looks like maybe lattes with Laurel for community engagement. Would you get that started? Is that an idea?
I've been thinking of ways. Um, I've been thinking of names. So yes, that was one that kind of popped through my head. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm definitely. I cannot. I do have a full-time job, so I'm
sure.
not gonna be able to dedicate the 100 hours a week that Cody does. But I'm hoping to at least have once a week listening session, and then maybe something like this where I can
Mhm.
be bringing in people who can't travel. Um, to meet in person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think I mean, that's the cool thing of just so many different ways to connect with folks and trying to meet them where they're at. So I've seen you work really hard, even though you're not, running against anybody. You're ready to go. It'll just have your name to bubble in, but you're still putting in the effort. So that's huge because that translates and it's a great way to meet folks. So what has been your experience campaigning so far?
um, it's been interesting, and I feel like I get put in this kind of interesting position where I can see both sides of things a lot of times, and so it's been interesting. I definitely decided that I don't want a political career after
Mm,
campaigning. I
fair,
will.
fair.
I believe strongly in supporting our local government and fixing processes. But I could not imagine trying to do this on like a larger level with even more things happening. But it's been interesting. I find that people assume things about me a lot.
Mm.
I read things about myself all the time in the like even in the paper. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that's what I thought or believed. But
What comes to mind? What comes to mind what's the biggest like, wait, what moment you've had so
um,
far?
you know, so far it's been kind of minimal. They've been like minor things, but I'm like,
Sure.
oh, that's interesting. Um, you know, uh I think it's just in general, people make assumptions, and
Hmm.
there's people who haven't met me or talked to me who will then either I get accused of being like either like I've been called a socialist, and then I've been get the painter orange and like Trump things, and
Right.
and it's funny because I am unaffiliated, but
Hmm.
um I've been unaffiliated for a very long time. And it was more, and I was independent when I lived in Arizona because that was the option.
Sure.
But I feel like I like to look at every issue on a case by case, basis and make my personal, use logic and what's best for the community versus like party lines, I guess.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think that's where I don't quite fit into a box.
Hmm.
But again, like I'm just a person who lives in our community and cares about it. And so, and I think if we had people like, and I'm not saying we don't, but if that's who's running for city council is people who care about the community, we're going to have much better outcomes than, if you have some other goal.
Sure. Personal ambition, what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. No, it seems like, and that's I can understand where voters come from because that's how a lot of us are trained almost of like, well, are you a leftist? Are you a rightist? Are you, a Dem? What are you? It's
Yeah.
like, well, I'm a person with ideas. Would
Yeah.
you like to hear them? No. It's like,
Yeah.
just tell me who you
I've
are.
had that email back and forth several times where I'm like, well, this is a nonpartisan position and I'm planning to be nonpartisan in this position and do what's best for Grand Junction. Um, and they're like, but what side
Mm,
are you? And I'm like, it depends on the issue,
right. Right.
and
Yeah. No, I think it's hopefully, I think, Colorado's really been pushing that, it seems, with the unaffiliated side, being able to engage in different elections. So maybe we'll be able to break that spell a little bit. Again, so for folks that are just tuning in now, we're doing a town hall here with Laurel Cole, a soon to be city council member. If you have any questions, please just send those into the chat. Even if you've sent something before, go ahead and we'll read them off. And in the meantime, let's dive in a little bit to, your top three issues. At the beginning of this campaign, Better Together reached out to all candidates to receive their top issues, top three. You were the first to respond, so thank you for that. And your three were transparency, fiscal accountability, and housing affordability. Let's start with each one. So, with transparency, what does that mean? And what can the city do if you have specifics? What can kind of do to increase our transparency?
so to me, transparency includes communication, but also like providing the context and information for decisions. And so I think um, it's something that I think happens across the board where information doesn't always get to who it needs to get to. And it happens in even any organization, any business, especially with local government where there's so many moving pieces. But I think transparency it starts with having meaningful community engagement, and not just, getting just like to check a box. And I'm not saying that's happening, but I think that we need to be getting real feedback from our community and from people who both agree and disagree with it,
Hmm.
whatever decision or thought or idea is. Having differing opinions is where, is part of our community. And so I think making sure that we're reaching out to as much of our community as possible and in different ways. And some of the things that I think we could do, and I don't know if this is like something that can actually be done, if there's like legalities with it, but I know in other places I've lived, the city council will stream live on Facebook, so it
Yeah.
pops up if you follow it. And so I think that's a really interesting way to just kind of, remind people that there's a council meeting or something happening. And if it just pops up, they can just click on it and it's easy to access. And then I think also the way we put out our agendas
Mm.
for workshops and council meetings. So if you're just a person in the community, you're probably not going to know what's happening unless you're in a group that tells you, or you go and check. And like, so for what I do is I have a calendar reminder every other Friday to go look at the agendas and see
Yeah.
um, what's going to be coming up. And I've been doing that for 4 years where I'm like, okay, this is something that I wanted more information on or I wanted to hear about. And so then I might attend the workshop or watch it virtually. But I think a lot of people don't know either, like they might not have ever taken the time to figure out, how do I virtually watch a council meeting? How do I get this information? And so I think that we can, look at some ways to get that information out in a
Hmm.
more accessible way.
Hmm. I mean, I think the Facebook idea is, it's such low hanging fruit in a massive way. I know our school district does it, and it's great because I'll just be, scrolling and I'll just check in, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, they're still there. It's 11 o'clock. But it's nice to be able to just do it really simply and easily, and yeah, get the word out to folks
And if
that.
you follow it, it gives you that alert, like city
Hmm.
council meeting starting now. And then, it just it just helps get that information out in a little bit easier of a way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, I mean, one thing that I've noticed, and you flagged too, is at public comment.
Mhm.
sometimes I like to call it just 3 minutes of hate, right? And 1984 reference there, but um, because people will just kind of just spout off and they don't really get responses. You're not really decorum wise. You're not supposed to directly talk to a council member. Like, what are some opportunities or maybe ways that people can get some more direct engagement, you think, from the council?
So I think that we, I think it would be a really great way for us to kind of to maybe have a town hall type event that all the council members are at too,
Hmm.
where we can have that maybe some back and forth conversation, or at least respond. And there's a
Right.
lot of times where something might be presented in those 3 minutes, but there's additional research that's needed, or fact checking or more information in order to provide a response. But I think it's okay to say, I don't know that answer. I'm going to look into it and find more information for you,
Hmm.
but I think that having at least, maybe even as if it's something we do quarterly or something like that, but having those opportunities to be able to have more of a dialogue versus, and they would still be open meetings because we have, if you have more than three council members,
Right.
it's an open meeting. So I mean, it would still be something that would be streamed and recorded and documented. But it might start some of those conversations. And honestly, like, I think that's the direction that we're starting to go and need to go more into with, working on solutions for our unhoused population.
Mm-hmm.
uh, we just have so many really, really smart and innovative people in our community. And we definitely have fantastic nonprofits and providers in our area. But we have, people who work at banks that have ideas, and we have people who live in neighborhoods that have ideas. And I think having, just a wider community conversation with more people at the table, and again, you can't have every conversation
Sure.
with everybody, but I think if we had kind of like a large brainstorming session and had ideas coming in from the community, we might be able to create a solution, as most communities, many, many, many communities have not created a solution, that's worked, you know,
Hmm.
for their
Yeah,
community.
it's a massive issue, right? And we hear that across the board. I mean, um, it's funny. I have to mention, actually, let's dive into that. Let's dive into housing.
All right.
Speaking of communities, Helsinki, I've heard has done a good job out in Europe of, the housing first strategy.
Mhm.
um Housing first being, and you can correct me, my general understanding is, first and foremost, we need people to have shelter, preferably their own, that they can call a home, whether it be an actual physical home or, apartment, what have you. And that's how they can get on their feet and then start to receive those services and really just have a place of their own. Like, where do you see housing first when it fits into the Grand Junction puzzle? And just what are your overall ideas that you're bringing forward for housing affordability?
So I think housing first. And so when I before I moved here, I worked with the United Way in my previous community. And they had a program that was really based on education, for the community.
Hmm.
And they talked about the cost of each unhoused person, on a taxpayer. Like, this is how
Right.
much it costs for them to be unhoused. And they're like, for that same amount of money, we could give them a house.
Right.
And
Right.
so from my experience, and I did lots of point in time counts in communities that had, were much, much larger population than here.
Hmm.
I did that in Arizona, and I've done that in, Southern California as well.
What
And
specific places in Arizona?
I lived in Gilbert, so I helped out with the Phoenix point in
Okay.
time.
Yeah. So big population.
Yeah. And so, the there's just like, and I know that this has been discussed a little bit, and I know Scott's been bringing it up more and more frequently as well. But our unhoused population is not one group of people. There's many different types of people that are experiencing
Hmm.
homelessness right now. And
Hmm.
so looking at making sure that we have these different services available. I'm a huge proponent of um, dual diagnosis services. And
Okay.
so that's when you have somebody with an addiction and a mental health issue, and they're both being treated at the same time. Um, when you have mental health being treated over here and addiction being treated over here, a lot of times they end up on medication that doesn't work together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on how long somebody's been going through this cycle, a lot of times they don't even realize that this medication is impacting them, um, or making their issues even worse. And
Sure.
so looking at dual diagnosis services, with West Springs closing, I'm very, very concerned. I think we definitely need to be focusing on mental health. Um, and we need to be looking at how are we treating people who are unhoused and have both mental health and addiction issues. Though
Mm-hmm.
they work together a lot of times because people will self-medicate
Right.
as
Exactly.
well. Um, so I think that's something you have to consider, because if you take somebody who's not ready to be housed and you put them in housing alone, they oftentimes have a lot of issues with, you know, getting used to being inside. Uh,
Mm.
like when they want heat, they'll start a fire in the middle of the living room. If they have treated
Mm.
mental health, sometimes they'll rip the wires out of the walls. But it's not safe for them. And so that's why permanent supportive housing is a great option. Um, and then like um, just having a person that's there to kind of just help guide, is very important. And so I think that's, I know this isn't about housing first, but I think
No, it
uh,
fits.
it's kind of goes hand in hand. Like I think if you're housing somebody, and I know that the city's been working on this as well. I'm part of the I've been working on the housing strategies group with the city for the past year or so.
Great.
And so I'm in housing stability. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that our group has been talking about, you know, creating resources for people once they are housed to help keep them housed long term. And so that's an important part of it too. And so I think there's a lot of different kinds of housing, and there's a lot of different people who need different kinds of housing. And so we have to really look at, um, first and foremost, they need somewhere to go at night. It's just, you're not going to be able, it's so hard to get out of a situation if you don't have somewhere to sleep at night, and in a constant fight or flight pattern every minute of every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that like we need to look at those different types of housing. The problem with making that a reality is that it requires such a high level of subsidy to create permanent supportive housing. And then it's like hit or miss with funding for different types of housing. And then there's so many codes and things you have to consider. Like we've been talking about, you know, just different options for housing, for like winter shelter. We were talking about a lot, you know, previously. And you know, I'm like, well, there's all these strip malls. Like, why don't we convert some empty building, but the amount of money that it would take to make it up to code for people to sleep overnight is extensive. And so we kind of run into this like, here's an idea, but here's the barrier that prevents that
Right.
idea from moving forward.
Right.
So I'm still I am a proponent of finding a way to do like safe parking
Mm-hmm.
as an
So would that
option.
fall under like sanctioned camping too?
Yeah, and so if somebody creates a campground, then you can have RVs, vehicles, and just temporary moving um, housing options, but they can have a place that where they could have hookups. They could, you know, potentially have, you know, somewhere to dump and all of those things. But I know it's really hard when, you know, if you're living in an RV and then you're constantly having to move to figure out where can you park, and then you don't know if you're going to be asked to move either. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something we can do for a very low cost point. You know, I know that there was some issue. I know it was discussed in the past, but I still think we should revisit safe camping, or
Yeah.
not,
No,
safe parking.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I know there's a lot of like nonprofit groups that focus on that as well. And you're right, finding that funding is always, it's always at the end of the day, it's the money, right? And
Yep.
and what do we prioritize? And speaking of which, we have another question here. Marianne, thank you for your question related to the resource center. So recently the resource center had a 90-day extension. It was scheduled to close on the 15th. They have given it an extension with paring down of services about every 30 days or so. So the question being is, where do people go when the resource center closes? That might be rhetorical, but you can answer that one. The bigger question is, do you agree that there should be a centralized location for people to sleep safely at night? And if so, should the city continue to help fund it?
So I think that's a couple questions.
Yep.
I think that we are very lucky to be in a community that has a large amount of resources. Um, and I understand like the centralized location idea. How, however, like even last night, Bill was saying it didn't work to have the central location. It they thought it was going to work and it didn't work. So looking at what if that didn't work, what can we do that will work? And making sure that we're connecting that with overnight, right? So that um I think that there's been some conversation about, opening up to do a request for proposals from
Hmm.
nonprofits in town to see who has ideas and what they might be interested in taking a lead on. And I think that's going to give us a good idea of maybe some what the not the providers in our area have an appetite to take on. And I know it's really hard, and this is something that I run into in nonprofit all the time, is that we all want to do so much, but we have very limited resources, we have very limited staff, and
Right.
we have very limited bandwidth. And we all give way more than we have on a daily basis. And so we have to see who's has the capacity to take on something additional or lead something or create a partnership of nonprofits and providers. Um, and so where do they go? I mean, right now we are lucky to have two different day centers with Catholic Outreach and the Joseph Center. And I'm not saying that like that's it. That's
That's
all.
it. Right. Sure.
But at the very least we have some additional places for people to go and get resources. Um, and I think that um, the city was talking a lot last night about transportation and
Hmm.
working to create a transportation solution. And so I know that's been a huge component of working with the unhoused population is um, how do how do they get from point A to point B? What do they do with all of their things while they're traveling from point A to point B and back? And I know that that's something that in the housing, the unhoused work groups have been working on for the city. And that's Scott's in that group. And he, and that's something that they've been really trying to figure out some kind of solution for that. Yeah, and I know I think right now it's going to be a tough situation, and Anna was referring to it as a compassionate um, compromise. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, I feel like if they had just stopped it April 15th, that it would have just been like
Chaos.
yeah, it would have been chaos. It would have been dangerous for the unhoused population, and because they're going to be confused and upset and not know where to go. And so I think that the extension, I feel like some extension was needed in order to be able to create that communication. I don't have the answer. If I did, I would have solved the problem already. Um, but I'm working really hard with lots of smart people, and we're trying really hard to come up with um, just different collaborations. And the county is working really hard as well with the Mesa County Coalition for the Unhoused. uh,
Hmm.
so I think that um, we just need to keep the community conversations happening and get more people involved in the conversations. um, because I don't think it's a problem that the city can solve by themselves, and I don't think it's a problem that the nonprofits can solve by themselves. I think it's going to take all of us together to try to come up with some type of solution.
Right, right. Where
I
do
don't know if
you,
I
oh, let
answered.
me do a plug real quick. So yeah, again, for those joining us, thank you so much. This is Better Together, little local news source and focused on people working together to make things better. We have Laurel Cole here with us, a soon to be, that's what I'm pronouncing as soon to be councilwoman. So we're excited to have her. It's a town hall, so please submit any questions you have in the chat. And my question to you, and take this how you would like, but who are you most excited to work with on city council as a fellow council person? And
Hmm.
I'll phrase it as this isn't a diss on any other council member you do not mention. You're excited for everybody, but is there anybody in particular that you're like, ooh, I think we're gonna get along, or I like where they come from?
Is this including those that are rerunning?
Yes. Yeah, we'll say the council as is, and they've just carried through.
That's a really hard question.
I know. I ask tough questions.
Um, so I mean, I'm kind of excited to work with everybody, which is a
Mhm.
bad answer. But my personality, I've always been the mediator, like since I was a young child. So
Sure.
um I think that, like, and again, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I can usually see both sides of situations. Um and so I'm kind of excited just to work with everybody.
Hmm.
I do really appreciate the amount of effort and time that Cody puts into community engagement, um, and just trying to listen, and the fact that he will change his mind based on
Hmm.
new information, which I think is great. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'm really, really just excited to work with whoever is there, and hopefully we can move into a new era. I'm very excited to work with Mike Bennett. Um,
Okay, nice.
so far, the interactions that I've had with him, we did a kind of like a candidate orientation where he walked through the different issues of our community with us, and all the candidates were invited. And just like listening to him talk, and he recommended great books on communication, and just giving that, like, um, I just feel like he's gonna be leading the way to a very collaborative future.
Yeah.
Um, Hopefully those words don't bite me in the backside in the future, but I
Well,
don't
it
think
is.
it.
This is being recorded, so
Yeah.
yeah,
But no, I do have like, I'm very excited to see where he is leading our city. So
Hmm. Yeah, and Mike Bennett is the new city manager. Officially, when did he get started?
it was in December, so he's
Okay,
very new
gotcha.
still. Um, and we
Former
hit him
Fruta
with,
city manager.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and then we just, like, Grand Junction's like, here's a resource center problem, here's Fourth
Yeah.
and Fifth Street, here's a bunch of angry people. So I'm sure
Ooh.
that's been fun for him, but
Yeah.
he's always so positive and level-headed, and just
Hmm.
always willing to stop and talk to anyone, and have those conversations. So I think we're headed, and like, just the way the impact fee process went this year,
Yeah.
um, where he, worked to get the stakeholders time to talk to all the council members face to face versus just the stakeholder group meeting and then reporting through city staff. I've been on a lot of those stakeholder groups over the years, and sometimes it's felt like the conversations that the group had or the feedback didn't really go very far. And so, regardless of how it turns out, the fact that they had that, this is the first time that I've seen such a collaborative approach to working through, a change that's,
Hmm.
that impacts people and our community. So I thought that was a really great start, and he did that right out the gate. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really we have a steady hand on the wheel is what I've noticed for sure, and that's really appreciated. And I'm excited that yeah, he gave some breakdown to the candidates too on things. So another question here from our audience today, Casey Cole with a question around our schools and the city's role. So what is the city's role in helping D51 with declining enrollment and the budget shortfalls that come along with that? Is there a role? Would the city have a role to help find alternative revenues for D51 with Mesa County? So let's start off with one being, yeah, what's the role in helping with D51 declining enrollment and budget shortfalls would come with that? Do you have thoughts?
um so this is an area where I I sort like I think I'm going to need like more clarification legally on what city council's role is with it. I feel like as a council, we definitely want to um, be working with D51 and partnering with them um, as needed. They had the school board has their own governing board,
Hmm. Right.
so it might. I'm assuming there's lines where the city doesn't, intervene with certain things. But again, I don't know all the ins and outs of how that works. Um, so my thought is the city's role is to partner with D51 as needed and be looking for solutions, um, as well as I'm sure they are. So I think that's um something I can't really answer without, more legalities. I just feel like when you have two separate boards, there's needs to be an understanding of how they interact together.
Hmm.
And then,
Where do you, I guess where do you fall? Because like one big thing, right, with declining enrollment is just general population. Do you think the city has a role in attracting families to the city, young families, kids, what have you?
so I think that's absolutely part of the city's role. I mean, that also increases tax revenue, which helps sustain our way of life and the all these improvements and things that we want to do in our community. We need more tax revenue for that, more property taxes. So working to attract more young families is definitely something that fits into the city's purview. Um, and I think that um, some of the conversations that I've had with some of the, college age students or
Hmm.
younger people in our community is there's been a couple different things that have come up in some of the things I've been part of where they're leaving because they feel like they don't have a voice, and that they feel like there's not activities that keep them in our area. So
Right.
I think that involving our young people in, coming up with some of those solutions is a great idea too. Because I don't know what a 20-year-old is looking to do. I want to go home and put my pajamas on and watch TV.
Yeah, right.
So for me, it's I'm not going to have the solution, but they know what they would like, and I think it would be great to see have some of that feedback involved. And so um, I don't know if that would be like creating like a youth advisory board or something like
Hmm.
that. But I
Love that
think
idea.
definitely getting that like strong feedback from our younger generation on what would keep them here,
Hmm. Right.
because I think that's part of it too. And now we all know part of it is jobs and pay and housing. So, those are obviously areas that we need to be working on is, getting higher paying, jobs in our community and working to have housing that um, is attainable across the board. We're like, I have a 21-year-old son who lives in my house. If you hear a bunch of noises, he's upstairs. But he has money for down payment, but can't afford a home. And so it's like,
Mm.
how are we working to make that a possibility for the younger generation?
I mean, so you're living it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm assuming your son wants to stay in the valley and you would like him to stay in the valley and yeah, so like I don't know, this might be too big of a question, but what has happened? Why is it so gosh darn unaffordable?
Because places that had housing that was affordable attracted large amounts of people from places where they couldn't afford to live. And I think definitely going through the pandemic too, we've seen where people realize they could work remotely and they don't necessarily need to live in the community that their job is in for a lot of different positions. So I think that people started kind of migrating to places that they want to live. And because we have such amazing, recreational activities out here, it is a great place, and there's a lot of um, really cool things you can do out here. And so I think um, and then housing, I definitely did not get my house when it was it's affordable by today's standards, but it was
Sure.
not then. And then my neighbors are like, I can't believe you paid that for this house. Like we got ours for $80,000.
Right? $20
Um,
and a hamburger. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think there's been a lot of things that have happened. I definitely just watching for habitats costs. Obviously um the more fees and regulations that get put on, those add to it, but it's not the whole cost of the home. The more people that are trying to buy the houses that are here increases the market demand. And then we had insanely low interest rates,
Hmm.
in 2020 and 21, right before they spiked. And so people went on like a buying spree. Um, and so, everybody's home values were like up here and now they're kind of settling, but they're still high. They're just settled now. Um, and then when the interest rate went up, it becomes harder
Yep.
to buy a home because it costs more. So I think there's like a million different little things that all kind of just hit at once. But it's not just our community. At the HBA Housing Summit, they were saying that this is our Grand Junction's following the same trend that all the other parts of the state are following with housing. And so we're still below them, but the peaks and the valleys are very similar throughout the whole state when you look at it over, you know, a 10-year period.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think it's a lot of different elements all coming together. And so I think it's looking at what can we control, what can we do. But again, I think that if we are really working and we have the developers at the table, we have the city at the table, and we have other people with ideas at the table, that we can come up with more innovative solutions to get more, to get housing prices to be where they're at the very least attainable.
Right. Right. No, I appreciate. Yeah, it's a deep dive, right? And we have a few more questions here for our audience. And thank you all for joining Better Together tonight. We're got about 15 minutes left, so we'll get through as many questions as we can, and please keep them coming. So, first one of most recent, it comes from Karen Stahl. How will you communicate with city residents to understand what they want from the city council?
So I am going to try to do at least a once a week in-person opportunity for people to just come and stop by. I do want to try to do something like this for people to make it just more accessible to everybody. I know, like, for me, um, like an evening session would, after work, is a little easier, virtually is easier to get to than something in person might be. And so I'm trying to just get um a variety of different ways to really talk to people in the community and hear what's important to them. And
Hmm.
I've been doing that. I mean, I've been doing that for years. I've talked to people, not even campaigning, but definitely when I started campaigning, I try to make time to meet with anyone who reaches out to me. But I know there's people that have thoughts and opinions that aren't going to reach out. And
Right.
so, but again, like I think it helps to have like the little better together notification pop up on my phone and say, oh, it's the town hall time, and
Hmm.
that kind of feeds into what I was saying about, having the live stream of council meetings. It just kind of pops up and reminds you. So you might just want to sit and watch, or you might have a question, but like hopefully more people will get used to, popping in and asking questions when they have something come up.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, especially, I mean, I think it's been cool with, Cody doing his coffees. I know Anna was doing some stouts with Stout for a
Yep.
while. So I think all those opportunities are great. So I appreciate that as a community member, making yourself accessible. Question from Stefania Vascones. Interesting data about people moving here from out of town for opportunities and resources. How do you feel that's different from our unhoused neighbors?
So, I mean, I know from the data that I've seen, there's a large percentage of our unhoused are from this area.
Hmm.
Uh, and I know that we do partner with other communities that don't have resources. So, occasionally, like we do have um that partnership with some areas. Um, I don't think that like people are being bussed out here and left here,
Sure.
or anything like that. But I think that um, there's definitely, we do have such excellent resources here. So I could see where that would sometimes, attract different people to our community um, across the board. But
Hmm.
I, again, um, I honestly, that's a question I would ask Stephania back because I think she would have a better answer than I would. Um, that's, I work more in the other end of the housing spectrum.
Hmm.
And so like I can't speak from personal data or references to that, but I know someone like Stephania could because that's her day in and day out. So
Sure.
I
Sure.
don't know if I have an answer specifically to that, but
I think that's fair. And Stephanie, you can write in too, and I'll read it out for us.
she's
And
definitely going to know more than I do in that area.
yeah, well, I think that's what you alluded to too, of just, we can't all be experts in every area, so it's important to bring all those voices together, which
Yeah.
is what it's all about.
And I don't think any of us want one person or one group of people making all the solutions for everybody or being experts in everything. I mean, that would be terrible.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, what has been the most common question that you've received over these last month plus of campaigning?
100% easiest question to answer for you. Um, I can't answer it. No, it's are you a Democrat or Republican? Every,
Okay.
everybody wants to know that. That is one, like, I probably get at least 10 emails a day asking me that.
Oh no. Okay. Okay. See, I was gonna, how about issue? What issue is asked about the
Um,
most?
so people have asked, like, I've gotten lots of how are you going to solve the unhoused problem?
Hmm.
And that's a very I mean, I can't solve anything. If I could, again, I would have already done it.
Sure.
I'd be traveling around, then we'd be doing world peace and,
Right, right, right.
you know, making sure everybody was fed. But I think that it's again about collaboration and bringing everyone to the table and really having those collaborative conversations. And I being in the like I'm in nonprofit, but we're a developer, but we're a nonprofit
Hmm.
developer. So I like again, I get to see both sides of things. And I think that we're at a point in our community where we need to stop being like, this is all your fault. to the other side of anything. Um, and start, just working together. Like let's I've seen such amazing sense of community here. And I think if we this sounds kind of like um, you know, I don't know, overly optimistic maybe, but I think if we stopped um fighting against each other and started
Mm,
working together, that we
hmm.
could come up with some, like, I think we can make every other community like be like, here's how you solve these problems.
Right.
So I think, but I get that. I do have people ask me my stance on the pool a
Okay.
lot. And
Good to hear.
again, for the record, I think we should keep it open. And I don't know if any other candidates signed it, but I know I signed to support the pool. Um, and then uh, and then every now and again, I'll have like a very interesting question, um, like about a a parcel of property that the city owns or something. And then
Mm,
and it's like, could we do this with that? And I'm like, I don't know, but that's a great idea. Let's talk about it more and see what we could do with those types of things. So, but really, I mean, yeah, issue wise, I mean, people will be like, answer yes or no. Are you for or against this? Are you for or against that? And I think a lot of times it's not that simple.
sure.
Which I think kind of ties into the like why it's hard for candidates to say this is my stance on something. Um,
Hmm.
because a lot of things aren't black and white. A lot of things aren't like should Fourth and Fifth Street should we is it all or nothing? Can we make changes to make it safer? I think it's just there's so many different elements involved in there that it's too hard to say yes or no or I'm for or against. And like what I think I'm the thing I'm against is us making these giant changes without doing that community engagement part first. And so like that's the part we need to change. So that's the part that makes me upset about Fourth and Fifth Street. If we have that communication and that community input and buy-in, you're not going to have these things that are so divisive in our community,
Hmm.
regardless of whether you're for or against it.
Right. Right. Well, I think, and I get it, and I know I wrote up a little piece on just kind of candidate reviews and like uh I'm a big policy guy. I like seeing what people have to say and then being able to support or not support that. So from that standpoint, in regards to communication, and kind of, I guess, the last question a bit here, like, how are you going to determine, no, this didn't get communicated enough? Yes, this did get communicated. You gave some examples, Fourth and Fifth Street.
Yeah.
Um, did the resource center get enough? Like, what's going to determine for you?
The resource center didn't get enough communication at all from anyone. It was um, we are so lucky that we have such amazing providers that
Hmm.
can make the best of any situation. But if you say like now seeing how that went, it might be the option that a provider came up with as a solution. I'm not saying that, but if you put out like, and that's why I said I think if we do an RFP or a request for
Sure.
proposal and get those ideas, you're going to get a much better outcome, and you're going to get more community buy-in than if you say this is what I want you to do from the city. And I think that's uh and I think it's hard too because I think we're going to see this shift in communication. We're already seeing it start. And so I think people are going to start recognizing what it feels like to be engaged and to have that opportunity ahead of time. And I know I cut you off in the middle of while you were asking your question, but
No, no,
uh,
no.
so I think looking at there's going to be times where we have, bumps in the road, where we have, those growing pains as we're learning to communicate, but it's taking that feedback and then integrating it in instead of being like, okay, there's people upset, and I'm not saying that every upset person is gonna, change everything, but I think that like looking at when you have a large amount of the population, a large percent of the population is saying, I had no idea about that, then we need to work on our communication strategies. And I know the city was without a communications manager for a while, and now they have one.
Okay.
Um,
Good to know.
but I don't think it's all the city's like I think each member of council has the responsibility of sharing information, getting it out, trying to get that feedback from the community. I don't think the city, the city staff work, they're working ridiculous amounts of hours trying to figure out how to solve our unhoused problem, how to, do all these things. Like trying to plan for streets and stuff. Like they're not going to always have um the time to get to everybody. But I think that's why we have representatives of our community that are elected into office to help with that, communication process and engagement. So, am I going to do it perfectly? No. Am I going to be willing to take feedback and change? Yes.
Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful. Love that. All right, just the last few comments that we've got, and then we'll kind of just give you time to close. So Stephania did respond back saying thank you for clarifying. Most people in our community are not from out of town. It's very insightful to hear that many people are moving here for opportunity resources, and it doesn't discriminate between the houses and the unhoused. Um, and then Marianne, thanks you for signing that pledge again to save OM Pool. And then, yeah, let's take this last one. And you've kind of mentioned it before, but how do you answer that question with what are you, an R or a D?
I'm neither. No, this is a nonpartisan position. And I am planning to be nonpartisan in the role. Um, my political leanings don't like the office is designed to be focused on local issues. And so we need to be looking at what's best for our community, not a political lean, in my opinion. And from my understanding, that's why it's a nonpartisan. That's why we don't announce what we are
Mhm.
registered as. I am registered as unaffiliated. I tend to think I'm kind of um, in the center. There's some things I'm more left leaning on, some things I'm more right leaning on, and I know that's hard for people to uh, understand, but I definitely think that we need, to be looking at what's best for our community overall. And there's a lot of different elements to that, a lot of different layers, and a lot of different parts of our community. But I'm hoping to be able to represent as much of our community as I can in a nonpartisan way.
Thank you so much. Laurel Cole, really appreciate any last few comments here, and then we'll close it up.
No, thank you so much for doing this throughout the election. It's been great. If I haven't caught them live, I've watched them later. So I definitely appreciate this, and thanks for test running the town hall with me. Um,
Right? Thank you.
so yeah, I appreciate everyone who came and asked questions. And if you had a question and you didn't want to ask it in the chat, feel free to email me. It's laurelforgj@gmail.com, and I will do my best to answer unless you ask me if I'm Democrat or Republican.
You
I'm
could
just kidding. I will
just
still
direct them back to the video.
yeah. No, I will still answer it. But yeah, any questions, or if you know there's something in the community that you think we need to start thinking about or hasn't been brought up or has been overlooked, please reach out. I want to make sure that we're listening to everybody as much as we can.
Awesome. All right. Laurel Cole, thank you so much for joining us tonight for the first ever Better Together Town Hall. Maybe one of the first ever local, like live Facebook town halls. So thanks for joining in this adventure with me and Better Together. Um, good luck. I think you're going to win this one. I got my hopes up.
I have a tough opponent, so
Well, I look forward to seeing you on council and appreciate staying in connection. And you're always welcome back on Better Together. So thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you for joining us. Better Together is a community page here to bring you local news as well as decision makers to really help us as a community be better together. Thank you so much and have a great night.